All right, so the whole Murdoch succession saga. You think you know the story, right? We all saw the headlines, the big New York Times scoop saying James Murdoch had basically won the keys to the kingdom. But what if I told you that story got it completely, fundamentally wrong?
Yeah, because that so-called victory, it was the very thing that tanked his chances. It was a booby trap. The second that leak hit, James wasn't an heir apparent anymore. No, he became a massive liability. In the eyes of Fox's audience, he was suddenly this out-of-touch guy who sounded like he'd be more at home on MSNBC.
So let's unpack this. How on earth does a big legal win in a Nevada court become the very thing that ends your career? Well, it all goes back to that media narrative, right? The story was that James was this principled, modern guy, finally winning the fight for the soul of the empire.
But that narrative completely missed the point. See, the leak wasn't just a piece of news. It was a signal, a fatal one. For the only audience that truly matters in this equation, the Fox viewers, it was basically confirmation of everything they were worried about. The James? He wasn't one of them. And in the Fox ecosystem, that's a death sentence. Game over. Okay, to really get why this was such a disaster for him, we gotta back up a little. This fight was never really about who was CEO right now. Lachlan already had that job. Nope, this was a battle for the long game. This was for control of the entire empire once Rupert is gone.
And the key to that whole future is the Murdoch family trust. Now, this isn't your typical inheritance. Think of it more like a political game. The four oldest kids, Lachlan, James, Elizabeth, and Prudence, they all have votes, and they have to form alliances. It's simple majority rules. Whoever gets the votes wins control.
And that was James's whole play. He wasn't making a move for the CEO chair today. He was playing chess, not checkers. He was trying to line up the votes inside that trust to take over down the road. But to do that, he absolutely needed his siblings, especially his sisters, on his team.
Which brings us right back to that court case in Nevada. Here's what went down. Rupert tried to tweak the trust to basically hand the keys to Lachlan forever. James, along with his sisters Elizabeth and Prudence, pushed back, hard. And you know what? A commissioner sided with them. They even said Rupert acted in bad faith. So on paper, this was a massive win for James. It looked like his path to power was wide open.
So you'd think he'd be celebrating, right? Path to power is clear, legal victory in his pocket, but instead of playing it cool, James, or at least someone in his camp, did the one thing that would blow it all up. They walked straight into a booby trap, one they had set for themselves. And the mechanism of this trap? It's almost elegant in how disastrous it was. You win the court battle, you leak that victory to a place like the New York Times, you try to paint yourself as the principled, modern hero of the story. But in doing so, you fatally, and I mean fatally, alienate the one group of people you absolutely cannot afford to lose, your core audience.
And this is the absolute heart of the problem. You have two completely different realities. The mainstream prestige press, they saw exactly what James wanted them to see, a smart, principled modernizer, making a power move. But the Fox audience, they saw something totally different. They saw a guy who is about to be their boss, who thinks just like MSNBC, a cultural enemy.
And look, the damage didn't stop with the viewers. It immediately poisoned the well where it mattered most, with his siblings in the trust. I mean, think about it. His sisters are smart. They're businesswomen. Why in the world would they back a CEO who the core audience hates? That's just asking for ratings to collapse, which means shareholder value tanks. It's a non-starter.
And this brings us to the real bottom line, the part that all the family drama headlines seem to miss. This isn't some Shakespearean tragedy. It's just business. Cold, hard business.
And in a business like Fox, there is one single overriding truth. It's that audience trust is money. It's not just a nice to have, it is the single most valuable asset they have. Period. Everything else flows from that trust. So for the board and for his sisters, the math suddenly became incredibly simple. You could literally put it on a spreadsheet. Option A, James, audience trust collapses, ratings plummet, ad revenue dries up. Option B, Lachlan, continuity, stability, the money keeps flowing. I mean, what choice are you going to make?
So when you look at it that way, this was never about dynastic destiny or who Dad liked best. It was balance sheet inevitability. James didn't lose because of some legal technicality. He lost because he made himself a massive, unacceptable business risk. Simple as that.
Okay, so James is out, Lachlan wins. The end, right? Well, Not exactly. What did Lachlan's victory actually get him? Is he now king for life? The answer's a bit more complicated.
So here's the final deal. The trust got a major overhaul. James and his sisters, Elizabeth and Prudence, they took big payouts and basically cashed out. Lachlan now has voting control along with Rupert's 2 younger daughters. So for now, yeah, the war is over. The succession battle is settled.
But there's his ticking clock, and that clock is set to the year 2050. That date is not an accident. That is the year this new trust agreement expires, which means Lachlan's control, it has a hard deadline. So, that brings up the obvious question. Is his throne really safe forever?
And the answer is a firm no. What Lachlan has isn't a crown. It's more like a generational license. He has a license to rule for a generation, but it's not a divine right. His power is completely conditional. He rules by ratings. The moment he loses that audience, the whole thing could come crashing down just as fast as it did for James.
You know, it's impossible not to think of the show Succession. In a way, James pulled a total Shiv Roy, a big, calculated move that just spectacularly blows up in his face. The only difference, this was real life, and honestly, this finale was way, way harsher.
Because when you strip away all the Shakespearean drama and the palace intrigue, what are you left with? A very simple story. James didn't lose in a boardroom or a courtroom. He lost the second he proved he couldn't keep his audience on side. And you know what? That kind of brutal, pragmatic, don't mess with the money logic, honestly, it all makes perfect sense if you're Australian.